Good morning, everyone. My name is Gwyneth Cortez Inigaglia, Manager of the Procurement Division for the Community Development Block Grant, Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Program. In this pre-proposal meeting, we are going to discuss the request for proposal number CDBG-MIT-RFP-2023-01 for services of Policy and Regulation Assessment Services for Mitigation and Adaptation Policy Support, MAPS programs. I would like to introduce the Puerto Rico Department of Housing personnel. Along with me is Catherine Vidal, Technical Specialist, Gabriela Cabrera Soldevila, Procurement Official, Luis Lopez Diaz from Planning Division, and Carolina Fernandez Acosta from Federal Compliance. Any questions submitted in this meeting will be answered in writing and published in addendum. Any information provided in this meeting does not change the terms and conditions established in the request for proposal instructions. The meeting will be recorded and available on our CDBG YouTube channel. All procurement processes shall be conducted in accordance with the terms and conditions established in the procurement manual for the CDBG-DR program to guarantee full and open competition and fair treatment of all persons or entities involved in each procurement process. The procurement manual is available at CDBG website, incorporated by reference, and made an integral part of this request for proposal. Now, we have a presentation from the Planning Division for an explanation of the scope of services.
Thank you, Gwyneth, and good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Lopez. I'm a Deputy Director for Planning and Grant Management for CDBG-DR and MIT programs. Today, I will explain the scope requirements for the MAPS Program Policy and Regulation Assessment Services. My presentation will only refer to information included in the RFP package. However, I will try to explain in a simple way some requirements and important aspects to take into consideration when presenting a proposal for this RFP. As established in the PRDOH CDBG MIT Action Plan, the MAPS program will build on information related to policy needs across Puerto Rico, collected through the stakeholder engagement process during the action plan development process. This program has a budget of $10 million, and its main objective is to enhance the mitigative efficacy of policies, programs, plans, and projects across CDBG portfolio and other capital investments by assessing implementation opportunity of land use patterns and policies that prevent construction in disaster-prone areas. As established in the program guidelines, MAPS program will work to increase Puerto Rico's adaptive capacity. Number one, to establish short-term integration of qualified entities. And number two, to identify criteria to assess existing policies. Number three, to provide a public report and a policy toolbox that includes recommended courses of action, and to execute or implement engagement activities for the public and other stakeholders. The program guidelines address multiple considerations for the implementation of the MAPS program, such as establishing modern mitigation solutions, evaluating benefits from the use and protection of cultural and natural resources, identifying land use patterns and policies, and the assessment of social and governance structures that may be contributing to risk and instability of community lifelines. The way that PRDOH will implement the MAPS program is through three main components. Number one, the MAPS board. This board is an internal committee composed of PRDOH key team members that will lead the program's decision-making. Number two, supporting entities. The selected entities will review the deliverables developed by the program vendors and provide feedback to the vendors selected through this RFP. Additionally, the supporting entities will provide feedback to the PRDOH MAPS board related to program design and outreach. And finally, the reason for this RFP, the MAPS vendor. As discussed throughout this presentation and as established in the RFP, this vendor will be responsible for conducting the activities and developing the deliverables detailed in this RFP. Now let's start talking about the scope of services requirements. The purpose of this RFP is to acquire highly qualified and experienced policy and regulation assessment services for the implementation and administration of this program. Thus, PRDOH seeks to contract one or more firms for the provision of services described in this RFP. It is important to note that these services will be provided for a period of 18 months or 1.5 years, with an optional 18 months extension for a maximum of 3 years. And if multiple firms are contracted, then the selected proposers will need to work in a combined arrangement with the program's best interest to implement a timely and cost-efficient management structure. The selected proposer or proposers shall have or secure at its own expense the required personnel to perform services established under this contract. The selected proposers must demonstrate that the selected staff that will work on this program has the necessary educational background, knowledge, and experience to successfully implement and perform the tasks and services described in the RFP. It is also important to note that key staff must be ready to start working within 15 days after the contemplated contract execution date. The following list of experiences and qualifications are recommended for the execution and completion of the requested services. However, this list should be considered as a reference and not as a list of requirements. Knowledge and experience with legal and regulatory analysis, the legal and regulatory framework for Puerto Rico's governmental entities and municipalities, development and guidance for best practices on regulatory and policy-oriented methods, federally funded programs, proficiency in land use plans, zoning codes, building code best practices, and resilient standards in construction. And finally, public policy recommendations. The following list of experiences is recommended for the execution and completion of the requested services. And as I mentioned, it should be only used as a reference, not as a list of requirements. The selected staff must also have experience and knowledge related to the fields of environmental services, environmental protection, or the application of environmental laws and regulations for complex projects. Federal and local environmental laws, coastal laws and regulations, oversight of different licensed professionals such as but not limited to planners, architects, lawyers, surveyors, and or other professions. Researching, collecting, and organizing legal and policy-related information, supporting similar programs, daily operations, and staff management, preparing and formatting technical reports, legal analysis, documents, presentations, letters, and memorandums, filing, classifying, organizing, cataloging, and control of the distribution, access, and format of program records and documents, and supporting public engagement activities. Also, they must have knowledge or experience related to the fields of, I'm sorry, we included the same description. The proposal must include detailed information of key staff to be assigned, including degrees, certifications, licenses, and years of relevant experience. As established before, the information provided shall demonstrate that the staff assigned has the educational background and or necessary experiences and knowledge to implement and perform the task described in the RFP. As part of the proposal should include an organization and staffing plan with the required number of personnel, their roles and responsibilities, the name of resources or subcontractors, their resume or professional information, their planned level of effort with anticipated duration of involvement, and their on-site availability. Now let's start talking about the RFP task and deliverables. The scope of services is divided into 8 main tasks. We will be discussing them briefly, but for detailed descriptions, please refer to the RFP scope of services. The first task for this program is the analysis of existing policy framework, and this task is divided into background research and baseline conditions and policy assessment of risk and vulnerabilities identified in disaster recovery and mitigation action plans. The deliverables for this task include 1 written report and or other types of databases or program files, and 1 preliminary report of the identified CDBG-MIT action plan high-level risk and vulnerability assessment evaluation, 1 preliminary digital database, and the second task, the gap analysis and collection of additional information, is divided into the gap analysis and the collection of necessary information. This deliverable includes 1 high-level data gap analysis report and 1 revised digital database. The second task is gap analysis and collection of additional information. This task is divided into the gap analysis and the collection of necessary information. The third task is public engagement coordination and is divided into legal and policy framework, stakeholder profile, and communications messaging. The deliverables for this task is an electronic file submission of all information requested in support of public engagement coordination activities. It is important to note that the selected provider's role for this task will be focused on supporting PRDOH coordination needs as requested. The fourth task for this program is public report development, which is divided into the development of vision, goals, objectives, and activities, development of potential strategic initiatives and or public policy recommendations, and the development of an implementation strategy and the final public report. The deliverables for this task include 1 report with identified vision, goals, objectives, and activities considered necessary to enhance existing policy, 1 report that includes the analysis of the identified potential strategic initiatives and or public policy recommendations, and one draft implementation strategy aligned with a final public report. Task E focuses on program reporting, monitoring, and compliance, and the required monthly reports. This means that the proposers must inform monthly on progress and status of deliverables and milestones for each phase and or task performed for the program. The next task is the coordination with PRDOH, which includes the MAPS board and other MAPS entities, such as supporting entities and or others as requested by PRDOH. Additional stakeholders may include entities previously identified by PRDOH focused on proposers' ongoing coordination efforts. The document control and management tasks is focused on the proposer's submission of reports, presentations, work plan, meeting summaries, and other documents relevant to the program. As established in the contract, this is recurring administrative process required on a monthly basis. And finally, we have the closeout process, which is inherent of CDBG-DR and MIT. The proposal must complete program task and get approval from PRDOH. For a more detailed description of the task discussed, please refer to the MAPS scope of services. Overall, we have an estimated amount of time for each of the deliverables and key tasks, which may last up to the 18 months. Obviously, if a contract extension is to be expected, this will be discussed with the PRDOH programmatic division. The selected proposers are responsible for the completion of the program activities outlined in the scope of services. In addition to the activities outlined, the proposers should be able to assist PRDOH, MAPS program subrecipient, or supporting entities in the provision of additional resources to accomplish authorized assignments. All deliverables and resulting products from this contract will become PRDOH property. Thus, the proposers shall certify the deliverables to PRDOH. Under the MAPS program, special services activities may include professional services consultant on state and municipal policy and regulatory issues, professional services consultant on federal policy and regulatory issues, and on an as-needed basis, make provisions for various white papers, explanations, and professional opinions. Now let's talk a little bit about the cost form. When you open the Exhibit G cost form, you will see the cost form tab. In this part of the cost form, you will find instructions highlighted in green. Highlighted in orange is the editable section to enter proposed staff classification and hourly billing rate. And finally, highlighted in purple will be the resulting calculation for estimated hours and total cost. It is important to note that no names are required, only staff classification. However, if you have more than one staff per classification with the same rate, you can include them in just one line with the total amount of hours required. When entering the hourly billing rate, please enter the loaded rate or the rate including overhead and profit. Only areas in white are supposed to be edited. This section of the cost form is divided into the tasks discussed throughout this presentation. Thus, hours should be entered for each task per proposed staff classification. It is important to note that the cost form includes additional information to consider when filling out the template. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, please submit them in writing through the email provided by PRDOH's procurement team.
Thank you very much, Luis. Sorry for the interruption. We're having some technical difficulties with the presentation, so I'm gonna continue without it. Considering the complexity of the services required, the PRDO encourages the participation of various individuals with experience in different fields, whether in partnerships, corporation, or joint ventures. The agreements or associations between two or more entities in which they join their resources to carry out specific tasks or maximize resources to obtain greater benefits and results will allow the PRDO to use skills and specialization of each of the parties. If multiple firms are contracted, the selected proposers shall work in a combined agreement in the best interest and overall for the program implementation. Additionally, we will provide the following due dates. So it will be important. Submission of the question and request for clarifications will be submitted on or before May 30 of 2023, and the responses will be published in an addendum in June 6, 2023. Proposals due dates are from July 5th, 2023 at 9 a.m. and up to on or before July 7, 2023 at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Gabriela. Good morning to all. Submission of inquiries and addenda. Responses to all proposals and questions will be answered by addenda and will be posted on the CDBG-DR website. All documents related to this acquisition process, including the addendas issued by the PRDOH, are and will be available for download at the CDBG website. All proposers are responsible to monitor the CDBG-DR website for any issued addendas in this RFP. Proposal electronic submission. Proposals will only be accepted electronically. Proposals submitted after the prescribed deadline will not be allowed. The PRDOH will neither require nor accept physical proposal submission. If a proposal is submitted on paper and electronically, only the electronic submission will be considered for evaluation. Proposers will receive access to submit proposals after completing the registration process through the CDBG-DR website. Once the scheduled submission period begins, a link will enable access to the registration form. Please complete all required fields in the form. Proposal must be submitted with the closing date and time scheduled. Access to upload the proposals will begin 3 business days before the closing scheduled date and time. The evaluation criteria. The evaluation committee will evaluate responsive proposals according to the following criteria listed in order of importance. 1, professional qualifications and experience of all proposer to successfully perform the services required in this RFP, as evidenced by the successful implementation of relevant services of similar scope and complexity preferably in large, complex public organizations like state or municipalities, state government or municipalities. 2, professional qualifications of the proposed key staff as evidenced by the experience to the roles proposed. 3, quality of the proposed approach and its relevance to the services described in the RFP, including implementation schedule and understanding of the PRDOH goals. 4, capacity of the key staff proposed and the ability to commit adequate time to effectively perform the services in the role assigned within the required time frame. 5, financial stability of the proposer and its capacity to effectively perform the services. 6, level, quality, and relevance of the participation by Section 3, business concern and MBE, WBE registered in Puerto Rico. 7, reasonableness of overall price, allocation of effort, and overall value offered. Now, with SAM registration, proposers and first-tier subcontractors must be registered in the System for Award Management, also known as SAM, at the time of the proposal submission or initiation, the registration process right after the proposal submission. For more information, please visit SAM website. There is no fee to create, renew, or update your registration. Awards will only be issued to entities that are cleared and not ineligible to award of a contract due to suspension, debarment, or HUD imposed limitations, denial, or participation. Now, we will leave you with Carolina Fernandez from the Federal Compliance Division to explain the federal compliance requirements.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the space to present compliance and labor standards requirements. This presentation is prepared in English. However, should anyone need this presentation in Spanish, you can request using the protocols for this RFP. I am representing the Department of Housing Federal Compliance Team, led by Maria del Carmen Figueroa. Today, we will discuss as part of our agenda an overview of compliance roles and responsibilities. We will also cover some tools that are available online. We will also talk about documenting efforts, taking advantage of training that's made available, and reporting requirements, as well as frequently asked questions. In this presentation, we will be discussing Section 3 training, hiring, and contracting opportunities, minority and women-owned business participation, and fair housing and equal opportunity. Contractors or subrecipients using CDBG-DR or CDBG-MIT funding have certain roles and responsibilities. These include assigning staff who will attend the day-to-day implementation of federal compliance requirements, attending trainings and workshops, using tools and templates, executing the activities, and completing documentation that's required. You can also participate in Department of Housing sponsored technical assistance sessions. You must complete quarterly reporting and comply with the reporting requirements. The procurement package contains language that offers contractors the ability to seek a preference. Please remember to use the references and templates that are made available and that we will be discussing in this presentation. Proposers seeking preference should provide their self-certifications and sufficient evidence for how they qualify as a Section 3 business. The Department of Housing offers a template on the website. Proposers seeking MWBE preference should provide a copy of their certification and evidence of their status. The certificates provided should show the dates and indicate that they are currently active. The procurement package contains sections that speak to the applicability and the requirements for MWBE. Within those sections, you will find helpful links to online resources that are made available, such as the policy guide. Let's talk about Section 3. Section 3 is a federal requirement from the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. This requirement states that we should provide to the greatest extent feasible job training, employment, contracting, and other economic opportunities generated by this HUD financial assistance to be directed to low and very low income persons and businesses. The Department of Housing makes available a Section 3 policy guide on their website both in English and in Spanish. Contractors must read and implement activities as applicable and necessary. They also are responsible for their subcontractors assuring that benchmarks are met. For Section 3 projects, 24 CFR 75 has established the following benchmarks. 25% of the total labor hours for a project should be work hours of Section 3 workers. And from that 25%, 5% of the total labor hours should be work hours of targeted Section 3 workers. Let's talk about the definition of a Section 3 business. A Section 3 business refers to a business concern meeting at least one of the following criteria, which is documented within the last 6 months. The business is at least 51% owned and controlled by low or very low income persons. It could also be a business that has at least 51% ownership and controlled by a public housing resident or residents who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing. It could also be a business that has over 75% of the labor hours performed for that business over the prior 3-month period by Section 3 workers. In this slide, we're going to look at the definition of a Section 3 worker. A Section 3 worker can be any worker who fits or, when hired within the last 5 years, fit at least one of the following categories. The worker's income for the previous or annualized calendar year is below the income limit established by HUD. It could also be a worker who is employed by a Section 3 business concern. Or the worker is a youth build participant. Now let's talk about what a targeted Section 3 worker is. A Section 3 targeted worker for community development financial assistance projects is a person who is employed by a Section 3 business. It could also be a person who currently fits or when hired fit at least one of the following categories as documented within the past 5 years. Someone living within the service area or the neighborhood of the project as defined in 24 CFR 75.5 or a youth build participant. The neighborhood or service area for a targeted Section 3 worker is that in which you can find at least 5,000 persons within a 1-mile radius of the project. If there are less than 5,000 persons within that 1-mile radius, you can expand that radius until you have 5,000 persons around the Section 3 covered project site. Each year, HUD releases new income limits. These income limits typically come out around April. The latest income limits for 2022 are made available on the slide. The Department of Housing has created various forms for helping maintain compliance. There is a Section 3 plan that can be used by contractors or subrecipients. There are also Section 3 self-certification forms. And finally, there is a form to help you document your efforts. Let's take a closer look at your Section 3 plan. This document helps you identify new hiring needs, subcontracting needs. It helps you plan your outreach efforts and assists your coordinators in identifying the day-to-day activities. It helps you define compliant procedures, and it helps you understand your reporting requirements. You can use the link on the slide to visit the website and download a Section 3 plan template. In this slide, we want to focus on the Section 3 self-certification forms. These useful tools help you uncover if workers or subcontracting businesses meet the income thresholds required. HUD offers also a business registry. This registry allows you to register yourself as a Section 3 business. The registry also has a tool that helps serve folks looking for Section 3 business databases. We will now turn our attention to minority and women-owned business compliance. There are various regulations that call for the inclusion of minorities and women business enterprises. 2 CFR 200.321, as well as Executive Orders 11625, 12138, and 12432 establish the participation of MWBE firms, which seek to ensure that when possible, contracts and other economic opportunities funded in whole or in part with federal housing and community development assistance are directed to minority business enterprises and women business enterprises. The Department of Housing has established an MWBE policy guide. This is available on the website in both English and Spanish. You can access those documents using the link on the slide. Let's look at what a minority business enterprise is. An MBE is defined as a business which is at least 51% owned, operated, and controlled on a daily basis by one or more American citizens of the following ethnic minority and/or gender and/or military veteran classifications: African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American, Hasidic Jew, persons with disabilities, and other individuals who can prove social and economic disadvantage. Women business enterprises, or WBEs, are businesses that are at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more women. The owners must be U.S. citizens or legal resident aliens whose business formation and principal place of business are here in the U.S. or its territories, and whose management and daily operation is controlled by women. The MWBE policy guide will identify that there are goals which apply to professional services, purchasing supplies, and construction contracting. There is a total of 20% minimum participation goal. This 20% is comprised of 10% for women-owned businesses and 10% for minority-owned businesses. Contractors are expected to perform good faith efforts for contracting, subcontracting, and purchasing opportunities of $10,000 or more during the life of the contract. The Department of Housing has also created various forms for helping maintain compliance with MWBE. One of those is the MWBE Utilization Plan. This document template allows contractors or subrecipients to identify how they plan on being in compliance with these contracting goals. There is also a waiver form. This document allows contractors or subrecipients to identify if they meet the requirements to waive their goals for MWBE. Let's look at the MWBE Utilization Plan. This tool helps you compile data for your subcontracting. It helps you identify what needs you may have. It helps hold discussions on creating supplier and contractor listings, and it provides awareness of meeting the goal for the contract and tracking. You can use the link on the slide to go to the website and download the plan template. Let's review how you should complete your MWBE Utilization Plan. The Department of Housing Utilization Plan template can be used throughout the life cycle of your contract. Completing the plan is pretty easy. You should read the general instructions in row 3 and complete sections A, B, and F from the document. Complete the information requested in the yellow cells. When we talk about certified minority or women-owned businesses, we are referring to those who have filed applications with federal entities such as SBA and others that you see here on the slide. Businesses who are certified can provide proof of completing an application process to be officially recognized as a certified minority or women-owned business. If you are registered as an MWBE, you should provide your valid certificate or other evidence in response to this RFP. In this section, we will be discussing how to complete your efforts and quarterly reporting. In order for you to report your efforts, the Department of Housing provides a tool. This tool helps you document and identify how often you are seeking interactions with Section 3 businesses and MWBE businesses. The quarterly reporting form allows for you to share and report your data with the Department of Housing. This allows the agency to fulfill oversight responsibilities and monitor the progress throughout the year. The Department of Housing's quarterly reporting form allows for the user to capture multiple compliance areas all in one Excel form. Section 3 data is collected. MWBE data is collected as well. FHEO information is also documented within the report. And finally, for those who have construction projects, there is a report for Davis-Bacon Unfound Workers Efforts Reporting. Awarded contractors will be responsible for reporting 4 times a year, on April 5th, July 5th, October 5th, and January 5th. This ensures that you are meeting benchmarks and documenting your efforts. The quarterly reporting template is also available on the Department of Housing website. Let's briefly discuss FHEO. Your RFP package will also contain a model contract which outlines fair housing and equal opportunity areas of compliance. Contractors are responsible for ensuring compliance with federal civil rights and fair housing through their contractors, subcontractors, and so forth, ensuring that all necessary efforts are being made. The Fair Housing Act and Sections 109 and 504 prohibit discrimination against the following protected classes of people: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, age, familial status, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation. The Fair Housing Act is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There are many executive orders, laws, and statutes that govern the non-discrimination of protected classes to ensure equal opportunity for individuals in accessing federally funded programs. Equal opportunity is afforded to protected classes through a number of these federal laws and executive orders. The Department of Housing has published policy documents attending FHEO as well as Language Access Plan. These policies must be implemented by contractors and subrecipients. They are publicly available online in both English and Spanish. You are encouraged to click on the links and access the resources available. As a recipient of HUD financial assistance, the Department of Housing must ensure that all programs affirmatively further access to fair housing and that the programs provide equal opportunity for participation and employment. Reasonable accommodations are changes made to policies, practices, services, and structures or modifications to afford equal opportunity to individuals with disabilities. The costs associated with providing reasonable accommodations and modifications are to be incurred by programs receiving federal funding. HUD contemplates these additional costs as necessary to ensure that the programs and activities it funds do not discriminate against people with disabilities. The slide contains a link for you to access the reasonable accommodation page on the Department of Housing website. Limited English proficiency refers to a person's limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English. Due to Puerto Rico's high Spanish-speaking population, all entities and contractors using the CDBG-DR funding must seek to ensure that both a person's limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English or Spanish will not place them at a disadvantage in the participation of programs. Let's briefly discuss some common, frequently asked questions. Can a business be both Section 3 and MWBE? The answer is yes. A business or a contractor can be both because these compliance areas are actually separate. Section 3 identifies the level of incomes to determine the status. MWBE uses race and gender information to qualify a business. If I am not planning on subcontracting, do I still need to complete documents? The answer is yes. You should still submit your MWBE utilization plan, the documentation of efforts template, and your quarterly reports. If Section 3 doesn't apply to my contract, do I still have to complete the quarterly report? The answer is yes. You will have to complete the MWBE portion of the report and the portion of the report that attends to FHEO. If I'm either an MBE or WBE, do I fulfill the total goals? You may have safe harbor for one of the goals for MWBE participation of 10%, but you will still have an additional 10% goal to show good faith efforts for any subcontracting or purchasing you perform with the CDBG-DR and CDBG-MIT funding. What happens if I don't fulfill the goals before the end of my contract? All awarded contractors should perform and document their efforts. The Department of Housing has developed templates discussed in this presentation that help you complete the exercise. You can submit a waiver before the end of your contract for approval. This waiver request should be submitted with the efforts and justification as appropriate. Procurement team, I'm handing over the presentation to you now.
Thank you, Carolina, for the presentation. We have reached the end of the pre-proposal meeting. Please remember that any questions must be sent by email and will be answered via addenda. Thank you for your participation. Have a good day.